Hi, everyone. It seems like we're having some technical difficulties with sound. Just a moment.
Oh, can you hear me now, Madison?
There you are, Denise.
I am so sorry. There you are, I was talking away. So hello, Community Action. We are glad you are with us. Welcome to Child Tax Credit Awareness Day. We're excited to have the National Community Action Network be part of this important day to elevate the visibility of and importance of this vital strategy to cut child poverty in half across America. This is a great opportunity with community action agencies doing VITA programs. You're very attuned to the value of the Earned Income Tax Credit, the regular CTC, and I know you're going to be excited by this expanded child tax credit that's fully refundable for families that you serve every day. So to offer opening remarks today, we're very, very excited to have two members of the administration join us. First is Dr. Laniqua Howard. She is the director of the Office of Community Services. Many of you have met Dr. Howard. She's been with us several times at our events and conferences since being appointed by President Biden earlier this year. I'm going to ask Dr. Howard to make some opening remarks, and then we're going to turn to Dr. Futrell, the director of the Office of Head Start. Dr. Howard, thank you so much for being with us here today. Can you share a little bit about your thoughts about the child tax credit and the impact it's going to have on poverty in America?
Thank you so much, Denise. Good morning and good afternoon, Community Action, and happy Child Tax Credit Awareness Day. What a historical moment. I cannot thank INCAP enough for pulling us together in recognition of the Biden-Harris administration's recent announcement that today was Child Tax Credit Day, Awareness Day. And I also appreciate being here with my Head Start colleague, Dr. Bernadine Futrell, as the child tax credit has implications for children and families we serve across ACF programs. As you probably already know and will learn more about today, some experts have indicated that the passage of the American Rescue Plan is the biggest anti-poverty plan our country has seen since the introduction of Social Security. Columbia University estimates that the American Rescue Plan will cut child poverty in half in 2021 and cut overall poverty by a third. The investment in the child tax credit is significant and is such a significant piece of the American Rescue Plan. Through the implementation of the child tax credit, our country is joining other high-income countries in providing an unconditional cash transfer to families with children, often referred to as a child allowance. We know from looking at the European Union, for example, that the child tax credit significantly reduces child poverty and increases family well-being. I know we're going to talk about the details of the child tax credit later in the webinar, so I won't go into that for now, but I want to highlight the importance of this moment and the impact that it will have, particularly for children of color. If all eligible families have either filed their taxes or otherwise signed up to make sure they receive their payments, it is estimated that over 4 million children, will be lifted out of poverty, including 1.2 million Black children and 1.7 million Hispanic children. And more than 5.7 million additional children will move closer to the poverty line, pulling them out of extreme poverty. Given the ability of the child tax credit to lift children out of poverty and address the intergenerational transmission of poverty, many advocates are working hard to make this a permanent change in our policy priorities as a nation, and not just a one-time appropriation. We know that this type of investment in children and families is critical, not just for addressing the impact of COVID-19, but for addressing the long-term effects of poverty and increasing family well-being. So this is why it is imperative, absolutely imperative, that the Community Action Network play a prominent role in getting the word out to families, particularly those that are deemed hard to reach. You are trusted messengers in your communities, and financial capability is core to the work of Community Action. Our latest report to Congress shows that you all have served over 360,000 families in just 1 year in free tax prep services, helping families qualify for tax credits totaling nearly $460 million. $460 million. This significant work with families is in no small part because of the trusted relationships you have built with families. They know to turn to community action in times of need, and we have an opportunity in front of us to help make a tangible difference in their lives. So let's get the word out. Let's educate our families on the child tax credit. Let's work with others to advocate for continuing the credit for families in need. And let's make sure all eligible families have access to these critical funds. This is community action. This is what we do. So let's do it. I thank you in advance for showing up like only you can. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Futrell.
Thank you so much, Dr. Howard. We so appreciate everything you do. And this, you're exactly right. This is what community action does. And let's get to it. And we're going to circle back to some of those comments you made about the deep poverty and the number of children who live below 50% of the federal poverty line, and what this even just does to move them above toward the poverty line. And we know what the brain science tells us. So fantastic. And yeah, turning to Dr. Futrell, we're so thrilled to have you here. We know the brain science tells us that children 0 to 5, 0 to 3, that brain development is critical, and poverty has such an impact on children because of the toxic stress that it adds to a child's development and the trauma that they face and have to navigate through. And that's why Head Start's such a critical program, a critical movement, a critical partner in this work. We welcome and thank you so much for being with us here today. Maybe you could talk a little bit about how you see Head Start playing a role in today's Awareness Day.
Absolutely. And thank you, Denise, for having me join. Hello, everybody. It's great to see you all. I'm happy to talk about it. I always want to start, and I may have shared this story with this group before, but you know, when I went to Head Start as a 4-year-old, my sister, who was my caretaker, she remembers a feeling of fear and relief. So as I got on the bus to go to Head Start, she was afraid for sure of her 4-year-old sister going off. But she had relief because there were so many supports and services that were kind of pointed to her. She was a teenager, she was 13 years old, and she was raising us on a farm. No one knew we were out there, but Head Start did. And so when we talk about Head Start, we talk about this Child Tax Credit Day, and I even reflect on my own experience and the experience that I'm hearing across the country with so many Head Start programs. Head Start, we show up, we work in communities, and yes, getting enrolled in Head Start is a key priority, but that is the beginning of making connections for families to the resources and support information that's out there. And so as we're here kind of kicking off the Child Tax Credit awareness, we really want to look at what this means for our community. And Dr. Howard has laid out the blueprint so beautifully, and I know you'll talk more about it. But as we look forward to this important work, it's so key that we have a process in place and systems to get this information out. The information is there. And as Dr. Howard mentioned, if the resources get to families in the way that we know it can, it will have a significant impact, a significant intergenerational impact that we are hoping and we cannot wait to see. And so for Head Start, as trusted messengers to reach families, to lead in communities, this opportunity is so powerful and necessary. And so, for example, what we're saying to the Head Start community is keep doing what you're doing, and we are supporting you with resources, with materials to get this information out. We really want to make sure that the information about the American Rescue Plan is out for Head Start for sure, the money that's invested in our programming, but also the relief and the opportunities for families is so important. And to do that, what we're launching is the Investing with Families. You all should receive an email earlier today, and if not, I'm happy to lift it up. Investing with Families will be our year-long initiative from the Office of Head Start as a part of our Head Start Forward action to really support and partner with families and move out of poverty, move to different levels within resources and support. And so what we know to be true is if these tax credits are fully received and accessed by Americans, we know it's going to cut the poverty rate. And so that it's on its own is staggering. And so what Head Start can do is really play a huge role in getting that word out. And as I mentioned, the Investing with Families, we're going to do this together. We're going to make sure we come together at least once a month to talk about and lift up some of the resources with the American Family Plan, including a chat-a-thon that we're going to do in July to kind of have like a TA type of space where you can ask questions, you can lift up things that you're hearing about so that we can share that information and then share out information around not only the child tax credits, but all of the benefits that are available in the American Rescue Plan. And the idea, again, is to do more together than we could do on our own. And so as we talk about investing with families, we're looking at that as an extension of what Head Start does already. As Mrs. Green, my Head Start teacher, saw my sister and said, I know the 4-year-old is coming to Head Start, but I know you have a brother in middle school. Here's what we could do for him. Let me make this connection, this introduction for you. And so we really want to just encourage you and support you in doing what you already do. And we're just going to organize it around investing with families, with webinars. I mentioned chat-a-thons, as well as other guidance that will be coming out. We're so excited about this. We said, you know what, this is a moment. We've never seen a moment like this before. We've always said, you know, we know what we do. We know our goal, school readiness, economic mobility. All of those things have always been the heart of what we do at Head Start. And I'm sure we've always thought, only if we could only, and now we can. And so we really want to make it easy and provide that support really for families to get access. So what I do want to say why I have you is, you know, as Dr. Howard mentioned, all families who file taxes, all families who are put in to get the stimulus will get the tax credit. If you're not sure, or if you know of families who did not, here's what we want you to do. We want you to go to Child Tax Credit for non-filers on the IRS website. And we want you to work with families to be ready with their mailing address, email address, and the individual tax number or social security number for the families and their children. And as well as the bank information, like all of this, I know you're going to talk more about it, but I'm going to make it plain right now while I have the mic. Get the bank information out so that they can get the payment direct deposit. So there are more direct steps like that in the email that came out today from the Office of Head Start. You can also follow along on our website as we're lifting up our Investing with Families initiative. But I'm so excited about this because this is, you know, it's an opportunity to connect the policy with the practice. Like the funding and the tax credits are here. So, and we're going to adjust our practice so that we can get those resources out. Again, I thank you for having us here. I'm going to stick around and listen to more. And I look forward to just seeing the impact that we are about to make. This is historic. And together, I know we can do this. Together, I know we can get the information out. And I know families, individual families, can have life-changing experiences through this opportunity. So Denise, I thank you for pulling together this event. And thank you for having us on. And I look forward to just the great work that we are all doing together. Thank you.
Well, thank you for getting us going. Your energy on this is fantastic. We just thank you so much for that. And investing with families. That is so what Head Start does. That's what Community Action. And when Community Action and Head Start work together, there's nothing that we can't do. So thank you again for joining us. And we'll make sure that the information that you have about your chat-a-thons, I can't wait to learn more about those. And we'll make sure to push them out to the Community Action Network as well. So thank you for being with us. Great. All right, well, let's go ahead and dive into more of our content here today. We're going to go ahead and put up the slide deck. Great, thank you, Madison. So before we kind of dive into some of the details, let's again ground ourselves. Our opening speakers inspired us. They are the ones leading at the national level in the federal administration. At the ground, in local agencies and state associations and the national partners, we are bound together by this promise of community action. That community action changes people's lives, embodies the spirit of hope, improves communities, and makes America a better place to live. We care about the entire community, and we are dedicated to helping people help themselves and each other. And this child tax credit is a way that we can really help America be a better place to live. And we have a role to play in community action to make sure everyone is aware of these credits. Next slide, please. And we're going to also ground ourselves in the value statements of the partnership. And I use these value statements a lot, but these first two really resonated with me as we were putting together today's PowerPoint presentation. Then in community action, we believe that all people should be treated with dignity and respect, and recognize that structural race, gender, and other inequities remain barriers that must be addressed. In addition, that we believe this nation has the capacity and moral obligation to ensure that no one is forced to endure the hardships of poverty. We know that child poverty, when you look at it disaggregated by race, is there's a proportionate disparity when you look at racial breakdown. That is unacceptable in our country. We also know that this child tax credit shows that this country invests in its families and that we have a moral obligation to do so. We've often said, is it a matter of the amount of money or is it political will? And in this situation, this country has said in response to the COVID disaster, the COVID pandemic, we're going to make sure that we reach out and quickly address the cash needs of families. Next slide, please. So the child tax credit, there's a lot here to be aware of, right? And we're going to give you some tools and resources and a link to one of the local agencies who's done a really kind of deep dive video presentation on more of the nuts and bolts, because we know we have a lot of VITA tax folks out there who understand the minutia of how to make sure a family gets the child tax credit. We also know we have a large number of folks who have access to families who perhaps didn't file taxes last year. Dr. Futrell referenced that, right? If they didn't make enough money to apply. If for whatever other reason they didn't perhaps have children last year, but have children now. There are going to be new families who are going to need education about the value of this fully refundable tax credit. Historically, it has not been fully refundable. That is a critical factor, something to keep in the back of your mind. It's fully refundable here in 2021. So the child tax credit will provide major tax relief for almost all working families. Now, there are some upper earned income thresholds where it phases out, which makes sense from my perspective. But virtually all working families are going to benefit in some way, shape, or form. And the families that Community Action serves can benefit significantly from this project, from this program. As we've heard, it's going to have the potential to cut child poverty in half. And again, looking at communities of color, the disparity by race, when you look at poverty rates, it's going to have a more dramatic effect in communities of color. And as I said, it's fully refundable. Historically, it's kind of offset your taxes. If you're CTC, you're supposed to get $600, but you only pay $200 in taxes. It would only take the $200 of taxes off and you wouldn't get the other $400. Now, families, they're going to get the full amount. And honestly, historically, when you looked at the upper income families, they were able to get more of the CTC because they had a higher tax payment that they need to make to the federal government because of income and tax rates. But now everybody's going to benefit from the same amount. Next question, please, or next slide, please. So the full child tax credit benefit for 2021 is $300 a month per child under the age of 6. That sure sounds like a Head Start kid to me, under the age of 6, an early Head Start. Those of you who run Head Start and early Head Start programs, if you have parents who didn't file taxes last year, this is going to be a window of opportunity to get them to file this tax credit and to bring cash into these households. And I'll just pause here and also say, we'll say this several times. This is a tax credit. This is not income. So even if a family is able to get hundreds, if not thousands of dollars coming into their household through the child tax credit, that income is not income. I know it sounds like income, right? Is a tax credit. It's an offset. It's not going to be applied to an income threshold to qualify for programs. So if families filed in the last 2 years, and that's what you heard Dr. Howard and Dr. Futrell reference, they will automatically start receiving monthly payments coming in the middle of July. And many folks, I've heard from some of you as well in Community Action, you got these letters. We're going to get these payments. What is this? And I've seen that on social media. I'm getting this letter. What does this mean? Do I opt in? Do I opt out? What do I do? So if you've already done your taxes the last couple of years, you're going to be cycled in. And the idea is your family's going to qualify for X number of dollars based on the number of kids you have and their ages. Half of it's meant to be paid to you over time over the next 6 months. So you get a payment every month for the next 6 months. And then in 2022, when you file your taxes for 21, you'll get the remainder. That also means if there are any glitches along the way, when you file your taxes next year, you'll be able to catch up and set it right. So we all know taxes and the IRS and all of this stuff isn't always as easy as it looks like on paper. Oh, you just have to file this or do that. It's much more complicated, but there are going to be steps along the way. So we want to make sure next year's VITA volunteers get trained up. We want to make sure our staff across the organizations get trained up to be able to convey confidence and assurances to families that this money needs to be applied, you need to go down that path to get it if you haven't filed taxes, and not to be surprised when you see the money in your account. Next slide, please. So, and again, families with children who have low incomes are eligible for this crucial tax relief. And I've said this before, but including those who didn't file taxes, because if you make below a certain amount, you aren't required to file taxes. But now it's going to be in your interest to file taxes. And we're going to talk about something called the non-filer tool or the non-filer portal. In community action, you know, when it comes to filing for federal programs or services or taxes or whatever, people benefit from having help, knowledge, trust. In community action, you are trusted partners in your local communities. So here in the second bullet, if a couple makes under $24,800, or a single head of household makes under $18,650, or a single filer makes under $12,400, and they have not filed their taxes in the past because they haven't had to, there is a new tool for them to file. You can find it at childtaxcredit.gov. Now, feds aren't always known for their easy to remember website names. That's one that usually we can remember. childtaxcredit.gov. Great. Next slide, please. Okay. So here's an example, and this is part of the White House's toolkit. So you can go online to childtaxcredit.gov and find more tools and more resources. This is one of the examples that I felt resonated when it comes to community action and the customers we serve every day. Tim and Teresa, home health aide and a part-time grocery clerk. So two adult household. They have an income of $24,000. They did not file taxes in the past because they haven't needed to. But now they have one child under the age of 6. So what they can do is use the IRS non-filer sign-up tool, which I believe is live and accessible. And I see it in the chat. Thank you, Ashley, for putting it into the chat. whitehouse.gov. Good information on there. And there's click-throughs to the non-filer tool. So their total child tax credit increased from $3,600 from $1,400 thanks to the American Rescue Plan. Thanks to this enhanced child tax credit, they are now eligible for $3,600 for their child under the age of 6. They will receive 6 monthly installments starting on July 15th, totaling $1,800, $300 a month between July and December. And many of you who are familiar with EITC and VITA, right? We've talked for years, if not decades. Should you take EITC in one lump sum when you file your taxes, or is it better to get a little bit in every paycheck? And there's arguments to be made on both sides of that equation. In this scenario, the idea, though, is for the next 6 months, especially due to COVID, you want to make sure to get the cash in the hands of families. So they'll get both a monthly payment for 6 months. They'll get the second half when they file their taxes next year, maybe through your VITA program, maybe on their own, maybe through other tax filing services, but then they will get a lump sum next year as well. And they will also automatically be enrolled for the third round stimulus check of $4,200. We know that many folks have not been able to receive their economic impact payment or stimulus payments because they have historically not filed taxes. By doing that through this portal, they'll be able to automatically be enrolled for that third round of stimulus payments. So I see a question here. What does refundable mean, and how does that benefit families? And I may have touched on this a little bit ago, but let me just circle back to it, because for me, the term refundable sits in my head as a critical element of this program. So historically, if you were a worker who, had a lower wage job perhaps, and even not a lower wage job, even working families up through middle class, depending on how much income you brought home and how much in taxes you owed, your CTC, your child tax credit, would go to offset your taxes. And if you owed $500 and you were owed an $800 child tax credit, you would pay that 800 would go to the 500, but you wouldn't get that 300. It would just disappear. Well, it wouldn't just disappear, but in layman's terms, or laywoman's terms, as the case may be. Now this family would get the entirety of their entitled to, the $800. It's not meant to offset the taxes. You're going to get it fully refundable into your pocket. So, question, what if a household is being audited for 2020? That is a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I'm going to make the assumption, and I could be wrong, but if you are in the process of being audited, you're still going to need to file your taxes, and you should still go through that process so you stay current. Again, I'm not a tax attorney, and I would refer you to your tax attorney, and perhaps we can do some more information gathering on that. All right, so let's go to the next slide, and we'll circle back to some of the additional questions. So here's the website, childtaxcredit.gov. Next slide, please. You can go from that slide, from that link, into the non-filer sign-up tool. And we're not going to go through the non-filer sign-up tool today. There will be additional materials that we'll be sending out. We'll be sending out additional information following this webinar in our e-newsletter. So if you don't get our e-newsletters, let us know. We'll make sure to send information out. And we know there'll be more information coming out from the administration, because I also believe on July 1, they're hoping to release another website that if you need to make modifications to your filing, so you can get the third child that just arrived in your household, you want to get them added, or if there have been changes to your filing status that you need to have updated, there's going to be a portal opened in early July to allow you to make changes. But those of you, especially who are meeting face-to-face with customers on a daily basis, you might want to dive into this tool to get familiar with it, because you may want to be sitting with your customers to help them navigate this site. And those of you who run VITA programs, you're going to want to get very familiar with the site, get into it, see what questions you have. And I know they've tried to make it easier to use, and I don't mean to use air quotes, but I am using air quotes because sometimes easy to use in layperson's parlance is different than in governmental parlance. So keep in mind that it may not be as easy as everyone kind of says it is. Next slide, please. All right, so we mentioned this earlier, those economic impact payments, the EIPs, right? The stimulus payments. Again, if they can use this non-filer tool because they haven't received those stimulus payments, and we know many, many families haven't received them. They haven't filed taxes. It's confusing. Who do I call? And you can't call the IRS very easily. That is a really hard number to get through on. So you want to make sure that people know that if they do this, they'll also be able to get a number of those past payments. And again, this could equal up to be some sizable amounts for families. And you look at, and Gene Sperling, who is a White House senior advisor to the president, I believe that's his title, don't quote me on that, said in a webinar the other day that, you hate to use the word life-changing, but these are significant dollar amounts coming into households to help sustain them over time, to build up savings, to do different things to really help their families. So keeping that in mind, we want to make sure that everyone has access to these resources. And again, they do not count as income, and they do not impact eligibility for federal benefits or programs. I will say what we don't know the answer to yet is around asset tests, because we know there's money when it's put into savings or you purchase a car over a certain dollar amount. Those were questions we were having internally, and we're still doing some research on that, and we will certainly let you know when we have that information. But income in terms of qualifying for Head Start, qualifying for SNAP, qualifying for LIHEAP, this is income at the moment, does not impact their eligibility for those programs. Next slide, please. And again, most families can receive the full amount. If you are a single parent making over $112,500 or a couple making under 150 and have children under the age of 18 who live with you more than half of 2021, you are likely eligible. So you can begin to see the phase out, right? So you get the full amount, and then you might just get a partial diminished amount of this expanded tax credit as your income grows. And this is less directly relevant maybe to the families that we serve in community action, but it may be relevant to some of you on the phone here today or some of our team members that you may have an interest in that information. We can certainly send you to these websites to find that more detailed information on phase out. I believe there's also total phase out at $200,000 for a single head of household and a $400,000 married couple head of household. I believe you may phase totally out of the expanded tax credit. All right, next slide, please. And don't quote me on those numbers. My apologies, I don't have my notes right in front of me. So you as community action and Head Start programs, we can't overstate it. Your role in this job, I used understated, I should have said overstated. It cannot be overstated. Your role in this is vital. Policy counsel, home visiting, meeting new parents when they come in the door, LIHEAP season, coming into cooling season, right? For LIHEAP, people coming in for services, weatherization programs, flyers that can be left behind with families, materials in your waiting rooms, up on the wall, whatever you can do to try to get information into the hands, into the hard to reach families. Now, again, families who file taxes, they probably got a letter. Can you assuage them and just say, yes, this is a real letter. This isn't spam. This isn't a scam. This is real. But we have hard to reach families. It's kind of like the census, right? The hard to count, the hard to reach with this information. You in community action have access to these families. You are these trusted resources. We need you to convey that information. We need your help. Next slide, please. So what can you do? I encourage you as local organizations and state associations to learn as much as you can about the child tax credit. Today is not one of those deep dive into the weeds on the child tax credit, but we're going to give you a link to an organization, Community Action or CAC of Knoxville in Kentucky, who has done a webinar with their team. It dives into a lot of the details. So we're going to provide that to you as a resource, and I encourage you to keep your eye open for other deep dive or technical presentations. Today, we want to elevate the visibility, elevate your knowledge, enhance your curiosity on learning more about this expanded child tax credit. So talk about it with your staff. Do you have an all staff day coming up? Talk about it. Do you have, are you making, do you have internal e-newsletters? Include one into your staff to make sure they have knowledge. Your staff are the key conveyors of information out into your community, whether it's with their fellow family members, extended family, faith communities, school systems. Community action is everywhere. We want you to hopefully train all staff who have contact with families. Now, this could be a really big lift. I know many of you have hundreds, if not more than 1,000 staff. That's a big lift. This is going to impact your staff as well as the families that you serve. So hopefully your team members will have certainly a personal interest in learning more, but we really hope that all individuals who are working directly with families will have a level of knowledge about this tax credit and encourage customers to apply. Develop flyers, information to share with families. Hold non-filer events with families. Elevate the visibility of this with families that you serve. And prepare for your VITA tax season now. We know that training of your volunteers takes a lot of time, a lot of dedication, a lot of focus. Develop your slide decks now. Take your information and train and prepare now. Next slide, please. Here is a local internal action plan developed by one of our local community action agencies. Again, Knoxville, Knox County in Kentucky, CAC. They developed an immediate action plan. I stole some of their slides. They told me I could. Encourage clients to set up a bank account for direct deposits. Encourage customers to file for their 2020 tax return. reassure them that if everything should happen automatically, right? We talked about that a few minutes ago, that if they file their taxes, these things should be happening. They'll find the money in their account. They're going to get the letter from the IRS. You want people to feel comfortable with that. Next slide, please. Encourage customers, again, to visit the IRS website when it goes active to learn more about the child tax credit. The non-filer tool is already active. I would encourage for you to, again, develop materials and resources with your customers. And again, on July 1st, we talked about how that website's going to open where you can modify your information, update your payment instructions. That will be an opportunity again in July. But this shows you an example of the type of slide deck. And I know Barbara Kelly at CAC offered to share her slide deck as well. So email me. We're happy to email that to you as well. So thank you, Barbara, and the whole team at CAC for this. The next slide, please. And this is their YouTube video. It's a webinar, but they really dive in. It was developed by one of their VITA experts, VITA, Voluntary Income Tax Assistance Program, right? And it really gets into the minutia of helping families file for the child tax credit. So I encourage you to take a look at this. We're going to put a link to the YouTube video in the chat box, and we'll make sure to send it as a follow-up email to you as well. Next slide, please. This is an example from Hampton Roads Community Action Program here in Virginia. I say here because that's where I'm sitting today, is in Virginia. And again, this is kind of one of those just informational slides that they're adding to their slide decks, whether it's with their board, with their staff, with their Head Start Policy Council. Internal materials with your brand and logo with Community Action's name on it, because again, you are trusted messengers about this critical tax credit. Next slide, please. The White House does have several tools and resources available for you. This is called Help Is Here. It's a one-pager. It really has the bullet points. It's easily print offable, emailable, tweetable, whatever you want to do with it. But it's good information, easy to understand, and just again, really core bullet points for you to take a look at. Next slide, please. I see in the chat, Andy, you put in the ones, Help Us Here in Spanish and English. That's this particular one right here. Again, it is available in English and Spanish with, again, some detailed information, but again, meant to be more of an overview of the broader program. Next slide, please. So again, this is the child tax credit website. whitehouse.gov/child tax credit, or you can go to childtaxcredit.gov as well, and you can learn more and access additional resources. Next slide, please. So before we move into some of the whys, let me just page through the questions here, because I'm not sure I'm going to be able to answer all of them, because some of them do get into more of the minutia. This is meant to kind of elevate the visibility of. But if a child turned 18 and graduated high school this year, they will not receive the payments. That is a good question. I don't know if anybody in our team has the response that can put it into the chat. I don't know the answer to that specifically, but we will find out. And I'm guessing that there's more information on the child tax credit website. Unless, Ryan, you happen to know off the top of your head and want to unmute, that's also an option.
Sure. Can everyone hear? Can you hear me, Denise?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Great. So on the question of the age eligibility, if the person turns 18 anytime during 2021, they are ineligible for the credit. So they have to be under 18 at the end of 2021, December 31st.
All right. Thank you for that specificity. We appreciate it.
Sure.
Let's see. What about a divorced family and the mother filed taxes in 2020? Should the mother opt out of it? I have a family and the mom told me she was informed that she needs to opt out of the option because she didn't claim her child in 2019 and would have to pay it back. That is a very specific example. I don't know if we're going to be able to provide an answer to that. I know there is some caution about making sure that you have the child is in your household for more than 6 months over the course of the year. So you don't want to double dip, right? That's the challenge. Only one parent or guardian, right? If a grandparent is raising a grandchild, for instance, you want to make sure that only one person is claiming those credits. Ryan, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, that's accurate. If you get an advance, if you claimed a dependent that would be eligible for the credit in 2019 or 2020, but they're not going to appear on your 2021 filings, then I would definitely, I would say probably the best option is to opt out of those advance payments, because if you don't opt out and you receive those advance payments, and then when you file your taxes for 2021 and no dependents appear, then you will have to pay the advance back, is my understanding. So I know there's some other options about, there's like shared custody options and like other things that you can do, but I would say just top level, if you take the advance and then when you file, it turns out that you weren't supposed to get it, you will have to pay the money back.
So if there are questions that, really can't get answered, right, opting out of the monthly payments may be a good option in that scenario.
I will say too, just to sort of like jump in, I can put it in the chat as well, but the IRS FAQs on the advances are extremely comprehensive. So I'll put that in the chat as well, because they do address some of these like more finer point issues that might be more of a case by case circumstance. So I'll pop that into the chat as well.
Great, thank you. All right. And is there a limit to how many children the family can receive credit for? If a family has 6, 8 children under the age of 18, can they receive this credit for each of those children? Ryan, thoughts on that?
That I actually, unfortunately, would have to double check that. I'm not sure off the top of my head.
I haven't read of any maxing out of number of children, but I wouldn't want to speak to that. Maybe we can do some research while we're working through the rest of our slides here a little bit. Great. Thank you. All right, well, let's go on to the next slide. So this is really critical because it will cut child poverty in half. And the National Center for Children in Poverty statistics on children living in poverty kind of references what Dr. Howard and Dr. Futrell started us off with. In community action, you know this data better than we ever could at the national level. You see it every day. And these are the numbers of the percentage of children in low-income families by region. 36% of all children in the West are living below the federal poverty line, 11.6 million in the South. For us, that's really kind of regions 4 and 6, portions of 6, not the entirety of the region, but 11.6 million children living below the federal poverty line in that region alone. Next slide, please. For me, this is the slide that always kind of gets me, and the one in the upper left-hand corner, where we talk about deep poverty, those living below the federal poverty line, and those kind of defined as near poor, working poor. And we get to you hear the term self-sufficiency standards, you have the ALICE threshold and all those sorts of things that people are trying to navigate. What does it mean to have a wage or an income that means you can sustain your family in this country? But you can see here, and granted these numbers are before COVID, so they're going to be outdated and will have scooped back upwards, I would make the assumption. But still, the percentage of children living in deep poverty, that means living below 50% of the federal poverty line. And these are kids who are likely going to be missed in the child tax credit because their parents have not necessarily filed taxes to be at that level. That many children, what does that number look like? 5,246,000 children living below 50% of the federal poverty line. You know this community action. This is what the child tax credit can help decrease that number in real and practical terms. Next slide, please. We talked about the disparities of race. Can't separate race, conversation around race, and the conversation around poverty. These numbers, again, if you look at the blue bar, it's the middle bar. You don't see the color on the screen. The middle bar is the percentage of families by race living at 100% or below of the federal poverty line. 10% of white families, 30% of Black families, 23% Latino, 9% of Asian, 31% Native American, 16% other. Then you look at the deep, deep poverty, below 50%. And again, the disparities jump out at you. 14% children living in deep, deep poverty. This is what the child tax credit can move the needle on. This is why it's vitally important. The brain science tells us we must invest in our children, 0 to 3, 0 to 5. It changes the way their whole life looks ahead of them if we can help intervene in these years. Early childhood is critically important. Next slide, please. I also see a response from Terry Reid. Terry, thank you. He was involved in the webinar that we shared from CAC. He's saying there is no limit on the number of children. That does make a lot of sense. And I'm glad you're able to clarify that because it should be per child. So I'm really glad to have that information. Thank you, Terry. Another piece of research I just want to put in your back pocket is this National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine report that came out probably now about 3 years ago. They did the research, nonpartisan, multiple Congresses, Democrats and Republicans coming together to fund this study. Next slide, please. And it showed with certain investments, you can cut child poverty in half. And you'll see here, expanded tax EITC is one of those lines, and the expand child and dependent tax care credits, are also critically important to moving the needle on child poverty. This is based in research, again, done by Congress, who were led by different parties at different times, nonpartisan academic research that shows us this math works. Next slide, please. The challenge is this is just for 2021. Come 2022, without intervention, kind of goes away. And if we believe this is going to be a critical part about ending child poverty or cutting child poverty deeply in this country, we hope that we will advocate to ensure that this continues because we understand. So it's important for community action to see the difference it makes in families, collect those stories, collect that data, collect that information, be ready to tell the story of the impact of these resources. Next slide, please. The White House does have a toolkit up on its website. Has some information more to elevate some of the highlights of today as Awareness Day, but you can use it all throughout this year, I think, in terms of making sure families are aware of this vital tax credit. Next slide, please. So before we wrap up here, just want to make sure we share a few other things. I should have said this right off the bat, but thank you for everything you're doing as we still, as a country and a world, are recovering from COVID. This is one of our newest graphics done with our CARES team that tries to tell the story of community action. This is kind of one of those historical moments where we want to make sure we're able to tell the story, to tell the impact. So you'll be seeing this. We'll be making these available as posters and things like that for your offices and such, but we just want to make sure you're aware that we are trying to capture the work that you're doing during COVID response. Next slide, please. Our conference will be in August/September in Boston. It will be both in person and virtual. I hope that you will think about joining us either in person or virtually. We have a lot of registrations so far, and we're looking forward to Boston, certainly. And I think our next slide is our contact slide. And so while I leave up our contact information, I'm just going to take a spin here through the chat window again to see if we missed anything on the questions and responses. I see Jim Schuyler from Virginia put in the chat that they've endorsed the expanded child tax credit and expanded EITC. Thank you for putting that in the chat, Jim. VACAP has been very forward thinking on their advocacy when it comes to this being a moment to cut child poverty. This is our moment. We know what the needle moved in the 60s. in a variety of ways. We know what Social Security has done for people above the age of 65. This is a moment for us in community action. This is a moment for our country to truly tackle child poverty. So thank you for that, Jim. Appreciate you putting that in there. Ryan, have we missed any other questions that you can see, or Madison?
Yeah, I can address just a couple here. Well, I would just reiterate that everyone should definitely take advantage of that CAC YouTube presentation, because it definitely gets into a little more of the nitty-gritty details. So I would highly recommend that. Just a couple of additional questions. So just to clarify something that we talked about earlier, someone did ask in the chat if the advances have to be spent within a year to be disregarded for public benefits, as is the case with some other income refunds, and they do. So it's 12 months from the date of receipt, I believe. So they operate the way that other tax credits that are refundable operate.
So they have to spend it within a year.
Correct. For it to not be counted as part of income for eligibility thresholds, et cetera. I feel like there was one other.
I also see there's some in the Q&A window as well.
Right. Oh, there was a question I saw about what if a child was born in January 2021? Does the family qualify? Yes, they do. Technically, not that this really matters in this scenario, but technically, in order to qualify, the qualifying child has to be living with you for at least half the year, but there's an exemption in there for newborn children. So even if the child was born in, let's say, October, that 6-month requirement would still be exempt.
I see. How does this impact families that usually owe federal taxes?
Well, I mean, basically, this would just be taken out of, right? It would be, they would either cancel each other out, or if the refund or the credit was more than you owe, then you would get the remainder, essentially.
It would go to offset whatever taxes you owed first.
Exactly.
And then whatever's left you would get in hand. Implications for opting out of the monthly payment. I have not seen any implications for opting out of the monthly payment, because you're going to be reconciling it basically when you file your taxes in 2022.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And my apologies, Knoxville. I kept saying Kentucky, it's Tennessee. My apologies. There's a Knox in Kentucky, so my apologies. CAC is in Tennessee, so thank you for that clarification. My apologies, CAC. If a child, okay. Someone said that they missed the answer about the 18-year-old who graduated this year. No, they would need to be, they can't turn 18 in 2021 to receive the credit. If they turn 18 at any point during the course of the year, then they age out. So they would have had to have been 17 by the end of this December to qualify. How would this affect tax refunds in 2022? For example, if a family typically gets about $4,000 refund, they would then receive the $4,000 minus the CTC that they already received. Well, it's an increase in the overall amount of the CTC is also increasing. So it may not be apples to apples in terms of being able to take 4,000 minus 4,000. My guess is it's going to reconcile and probably be not quite as equivalent there. I don't know, Ryan, if you have thoughts on that.
Well, it also wouldn't count as income, so it really shouldn't affect it at all, I don't think. If all the other filing information stays the same.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you for those deep dive questions. You pushed us a bit to rack our brain on some of this, so we appreciate that. All right. Let's see. Something else just came in through the chat. I would like to uplift the policy advocacy around revising asset limits, as this is counterintuitive toward upward mobility. Here. There are some states that have removed asset limits in their entirety, and we should promote that as a critical, viable opportunity at the national level. Could not agree more. Nothing is more counterintuitive, you're exactly right, to upward mobility than the inability to have savings accounts, to have a car that is worth more than X, that can be reliable and get you to work. So that's a very good point. I think we do include it in our policy platform, Ryan. I think we do address asset limits and support the elimination thereof. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
And thank you to Knoxville and Tennessee. Thank you for HR or Hampton Roads Community Action as well here in Virginia for your resources that we borrowed from. We appreciate you and everything that you're doing. And local agencies, if you find good examples, send them our way. We'd be happy to send them on to the network. So with that, I just want to say thank you for being part of today's webinar. You're part of a national movement today to elevate the visibility of the child tax credit. And again, my apologies for not being too much in the weeds. There are many other organizations that are going to get you that deep dive information. And CAC's webinar, as Ryan mentioned, is just really nicely done in terms of the details and from a community action perspective. So thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Terry. Thank you, everybody over at CAC in Tennessee for those resources. So with that, thank you to Ashley Freevert and Andy Pavey and Ryan Gelman and Madison Wicks on our team for really helping to put this event together today. And thank you for everything you're doing here during COVID. Get vaccinated. Talk to your doctor if you have concerns, but we hope you get vaccinated. We hope to see you in Boston. Thank you for everything you're doing, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.